reminded to always be respectful and mainly have fun. So, if there are no questions, without further ado, I would like to call upon the Prime Minister here.
Is it possible to get the live link first?
Please repeat.
Is it possible for us to get the link for the live stream for the debate starts?
Before, okay. Okay, before we start the debate, judges, do you want to say anything? Like, introduce yourselves. That would be appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Lu Wei. I'm one of the panelists. You can address us as the panel. Good luck to both teams.
Hello guys, my name is Bryan. Congratulations for reaching this far and best of luck for everyone.
Now I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister here. Start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
All right. Wait, there seems to be some problems with the papers. Wait. Here. This. Panel realized that on side opposition, when these politicians that are elected by the people because they give out these promises, these fake empty promises, they're not properly upholding not only their human rights in and of themselves, but also the whole concept of a democratic political system. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening I bid to the attentive panel of judges, the professional timekeeper, my brethren on the government side, and my worthy opponents on the opposition side. First part of my speech today. Beginning with the problem statement, the main problem in status quo is that politicians are giving fake hope towards these voters. Now, the stance that we provide to you is that we want to fulfill the we want to push out truthful politicians that to rule the country and to actually provide for the country. The main burden in this debate is that we have to prove to you how our side successfully fulfills these promises and pushes out the best politicians. The stakeholders that we're focusing on in this debate today are the citizens of these countries because they are affected the most. Beginning with some characterization. First part of my characterization: what do manifestos look like? What do they mean, and how do they play out in this debate? Firstly, manifestos are promises towards the citizens. For example, if the prime minister is promising, or if an elected minister is promising lower taxes, then they have to lower the taxes. Secondly, the manifestos are essentially the key reasons why people want to vote for these politicians in the first place. Because if they are not fulfilled, then their vote doesn't even matter at the end of the day. Thirdly, it is important towards the people's it was important towards the people's lives. For example, minorities, people on the ground, people who are in poverty, they vote for the welfare of their state so that they can have a better life through these politicians. They can escape poverty and they can live peacefully with other people. Now, what does legally liable look like in our world? What holding these politicians legally liable looks like, for example, giving a high amount of jail time, or banning them from participating in political parties or in a political party for the next 5 years, for example, as well as giving a very high cash fine. Moving on to my principal argument, the main principle in this debate is that when they are not fulfilling their manifesto, they're essentially committing a crime. Why? Because these voters vote for promise. They are promised these certain things, for example, lowering of gas prices, lowering of tax. So when they are being lied to, they are essentially betrayed by these politicians. Why is this necessarily important? The main thing that why it's important is that we are under a social contract from the government, meaning that the government controls our lives. We have to pay taxes. We have to abide to the law. We cannot do certain things. So when government so what happens then, which is the whole reason why we should have democratic rights, because if we are owing something to the government, then the government should at least give something back to us. So the most essential thing about a democratic right is that the state has the right to be informed. The state has to be informed voters. So when the government lies to us, they're essentially not fulfilling this democratic right at the first place, because they are lying, and therefore democracy is illegitimate. Moving on to my practical argument is about how on our side, government is the mutually exclusive benefit of the government side is that we provide a better policy and better welfare for the citizens. Why is this necessarily true? Firstly, politicians will be able to fulfill their manifestos. They'll be able to dedicate their time. They'll be able to use their influence and capacity. Secondly, there will be an annihilation of false manifestos, because the most important thing about this is that false manifestos could make other teams lose. You're offering so much that you outshine other parties, but you're outshining them with false and empty promises. Thirdly, because we will provide more realistic manifestos. So to say that manifestos on our world will be easier and or more likely to be implemented. But what are the impacts of this? Firstly and most importantly, the welfare of the citizens. People will be able to get better lives. Because if this manifesto happens, for example, if the manifesto is a decrease in the cost of healthcare, then if this happens, then we were able to save so many lives, which is the most important human right at the end of the day, which is the right to live. This can apply to so many things, for example, especially minorities, but this can also apply to so many other things, for example, housing prices that are skyrocketing through the roof. Now, lastly, but most importantly, we actually uphold the right and the concept of democracy, because we provide to these people proper information and proper reason to vote. Never been bothered to propose.
An amazing speech from the Prime Minister. Speaker spoke for 4 minutes, 14 seconds. So now I'd like to call upon the opposition leader. Here.
Thank you. I'm going to start off by rebutting Prime Minister by stating that by not fulfilling manifestos, you are intentionally doing so. It's simply fallacious, as not only do certain unfulfillment of manifestos not intentional, they could also be affected by external forces that politicians may not have control about. So, which also leads to my first substantive. There are external factors that throw a curveball into the path of achieving said manifesto, which politicians may not have full control over. Politicians, particularly those in smaller countries, where resources are limited. It is completely unreasonable to hold politicians legally liable when they do not have the full control over what is going on. In the context of smaller countries such as Singapore, we are highly connected to the rest of the world, with worldwide trade happening every single day. This makes our country extremely vulnerable to external factors, and our plans may have a 180-degree spin, which eventually results in politicians not being able to fulfill the manifestos. In such a case, it will be deemed as extremely unreasonable to hold politicians liable for something they have no control over, particularly in the context of smaller countries who are pushed around by rippling effects of policies implemented by larger countries or superpowers such as United States of America and China. Thank you.
An amazing speech from the opposition leader. Now I'd like to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Setting up my timer. Starting my speech in 3, 2. Not only did they bring a flimsy argument that I can rebut easily, but they did not even engage at all with my Prime Minister. Very proud to propose. Few things in my speech. I'm going to rebut their side of the House. Secondly, I'm going to bring on my new substantive argument about how we are able to get more trust inside the democratic system. Number one, they say about how people, this is not intentional. The unfulfillment of manifestos is not intentional. I have 4 responses to this. Number one, if it is true that it is in the extreme case that the weather is so bad that it's scorching hot that you cannot build bridges and all that, in these extreme cases, it can still be brought to court because we say that legally liable means that you are going to go through the court process, and if it is true that it is outside of your control at all, then you can still be negotiated. Secondly, even if it is not true, like this is still bad. Why? Because why would you bring up manifestos that really can't be confirmed? If that manifestos requires a lot of money that you can't confirm, you shouldn't even bring up the manifesto itself. That is the fundamental human violation rights because you are lying to your citizens. Actually, you are saying that, oh, it is confirmed that we are going to do this, but they do not even know the outcome at the end. We say that number 3, even if this does not happen, they most likely control. Why? Because especially inside this 21st century, you have a lot of data analysis that you can predict the weather or you can predict the economic activity of this world. But secondly, we say that your term is a lot, like 5 years is a lot. If you're unable to finish the project in 5 years, that's really your fault. Like you really should be impeached for that. And like even if you are going, you say that this is unjustified. Look, you may be jailed for 3 years, but after 3 years, you have a second chance at this. We say that at the point in which you do not hold them accountable at all, that is when you do not uphold democratic rights. But lastly, even if you do not buy all that, you say that the people's democratic right to be upheld, for their issues to be upheld inside the parliament itself, because they are embedded, they require to vote, they sell their vote, they sell their trust towards the politician itself. At the point in which they sell their trust, their democratic rights is more important than a measly politician being jailed. We say that the lives of millions of people are more important than one individual. Lastly, let's compare. Look, even if these politicians get jailed, at least on our side, some politicians get jailed without being guilty. At least on our side of the house, we are able to improve minorities' life because they are going to initiate their manifestos by improving welfare and education. They are going to improve the citizens' welfare. They are not going to make false promises. They are going to improve the healthcare system that's going to save millions and billions of lives. That's going to be more important inside in terms of fundamental levels. My last argument then is about how citizens are going to get more trust inside the legal system, inside the democratic system. Number one is because they have trust inside the integrity of politicians. They don't see politicians as lying elitist people that they do not trust anymore. But secondly, they are going to trust more inside the systems itself. They know that the systems are going to implement strategies and implement policies that is actually going to create checks and balances towards politicians. Thirdly, they are going to feel as if their problems are heard and politicians are going to actually care about them. The impacts of this is twofold. Number one is that when people trust inside the legal system, more people are going to vote. When more people are going to vote, we are going to uphold democracy. People are going to be incentivized to become more informed, read the news, and trust the government. Secondly, people are going to follow the law and not going to protest against the government that is going to create havoc on the streets. People are going to be more safe. Lastly, I'm going to just predict what they're going to bring. What if they say that, oh, other checks and balances exist? Even if the next election exists, manifestos most likely do not matter because there are other manifestos in the first place. They're going to do bad strategies like political mudslinging. So manifestos like before this that weren't fulfilled didn't even matter. If you want side where we make people live better and politicians get more accountability side by side of government.
Wonderful speech from Deputy Prime Minister. Speaker spoke for 4 minutes, 19 seconds. Now I'd like to call upon the Deputy Opposition Leader. Here he is.
Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, I would like to begin my speech by rebutting some of side for government's arguments. Firstly, PM has stated that fake empty promises and what if he really wants, but however, we would want to rebut this by saying, what if a politician would really like to enact change but is unable to due to sudden problems? However, and they also bring up the point whereby truthful politicians are necessarily good politicians. However, that is rebutted by my second substantive, whereby if the means to the end of the manifesto are bad, should we not then punish the politician? In side government's world, the criteria for skirting legal liability is by fulfilling their manifesto. And by doing so, it opens up many possibilities for, firstly, the manifesto being bad in nature, and secondly, the means to achieve the manifesto being potentially legal or unethical. Putting such immense legal pressure on politicians can result them in being incentivized to use illegal or unethical ways to fulfill their manifestos. An even worse scenario would be that if a politician without the people's best interest at heart sets seemingly good manifestos, however takes extremely illegal steps to fulfill them, thereby causing detrimental harm to their citizens, should he not then be punished legally as well? I would like to take Trump for example. His manifesto to make America great again is a seemingly positive outlook on the country. However, by doing so in his most recent term, he has tanked the US stock market, which has caused irreparable harm to his citizens by tanking their 401ks and has even resulted to mass deportations of US citizens as well as those who are seemingly just suspected of being in Venezuelan gangs. In order to fulfill his ideal America, in such a scenario, by fulfilling his manifesto, he is doing irreparable harm to his citizens. Should he not then be legally liable? In opposition's world, Trump would not be liable in such a case. Which brings me to my third point. The DPM has stated that in their world, the citizens will be more incentivized to read the news and be an informed voter. However, how is this true? In the case of America, where voters are becoming increasingly polarized, they are more likely to respond to incredibly polarizing views such as "Make America Great Again" and to own the liberals. However, this is simply not a case that we want to do. By holding politicians legally liable for not fulfilling their manifestos, it also incentivizes them to set lower bars for their manifestos. Since all politicians have to do is to achieve the manifesto to avoid legal charges, it disincentivizes risk-taking and innovation, and thus politicians may set low bars of manifestos just to completely null the risks of being legally liable for not fulfilling their manifestos. To point to an example, the No Child Left Behind policy in the United States, which aimed to increase pass rates for high schoolers by cutting funding from schools with underperforming pass rates. However, this simply reduced effective instruction and student learning by causing states to lower achievement goals and motivate teachers to teach to the test, thereby inflating pass rates to avoid the federal government from withholding funding. This severely impacted the education standards of students, as those who fell behind to be simply pushed onto the next level despite not having met all the learning objectives to a passable level. Simply put, if we shoot for the moon, we might at least fall among the stars. But by shooting for a stick and an inch away, one will simply land on the stick. Inside government's world, they are creating a world where politicians are less incentivized to take innovative leaps and therefore stick to basics. And by therefore, they are not actually fulfilling their promises of creating a better future for all. Thank you very much.
A wonderful speech from the deputy opposition leader. Now I'd like to call upon the government whip. Here.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Excuse me. Excuse me. Am I audible?
I can't hear you very clearly.
Yes.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Yes, you're perfectly audible. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start my speech. I know, realize that all of the arguments on their side, on the opposite side, have all been assumption arguments. All of the arguments are dependent on external forces or if these manifestos are bad or the 1%. On our side, the government side, we have proven on all of our arguments to be true and give better analysis and rebutted to all of their arguments in the first place. So for that, good morning, good evening, and assalamualaikum. Okay, first I'm going to rebut on the LO side. He really said a lot about external forces and how it can disrupt, for example, Mother Nature and environmentalists. But then the DLO just brings it back up. But the thing is, I think that's unnecessary because my DPM already rebutted fully, and I'll not be touching on that case. I'll most probably be touching on the DLO's case. First, he said a lot about these politicians where they shouldn't be held liable for this legal liable, but they can't fulfill this manifesto. But please, panel, realize that these politicians have every right to be held liable because everything that they have, all of their mansions, all of their salaries, are because of the citizens and all of the taxpayers. This is why the citizens should have the right to actually be promised of their manifestos to actually improve their livelihood, which is the biggest thing on the government side are actually bringing up to this table of debate. Next, he also brings up about Trump on how he can't do his manifestos because he has to do these bad things, for example, the tariffs happening in this world. But first, we just say that that's just Trump's fault because he takes such a big manifestos. But even if we don't believe that, we say that this harm also happens on their side. Why? Because even without our good policies, it happens with their bad policies, with no good policies on the outside, it will much be happening way worse, which I'll explain later in my second analysis. Why this? So what happens with this is that more bad politicians will be produced in their status quo and in their work. For example, Trump, because they don't have the responsibility and they don't have these policies to be held upon. So what's on their side? Even if you have these harms, why? Because my DPM already said that with our policies, these prime ministers will take a simpler manifesto and a more achievable manifesto. So we believe that even though we have less quality manifestos, which are maybe not high achieving, at least we can do and actually successfully complete these manifestos way more on their side, which will be most lookable by the citizens and they can actually know these differences. Next, please realize that all of the harms done by the DPM to outside only happens for a small part to outside. Because all these bad manifestos will most likely to happen. Even if all these harms actually happen, it won't actually impact our world because it happens like once in a lifetime. And it happens like only in a while and in only in a while. Okay, but after that, I'm just going to clashes. The biggest clashes into this debate is about these politicians having the right to be held liable and to not. But we feel that we win this clash because we have given so many reasons on why these politicians should be held liable. For example, we say that politicians get all of their livelihoods and their money from the from these taxpayers, and the citizens should actually have these things. Okay, next I'm going to be doing waiting. So what is the biggest thing on the government side and why do we actually win this debate? First, because we actually give the stakeholders, these citizens, these taxpayers to these politicians better livelihood and a better quality of life. Why do we say this? Because these manifestos that is promised to these voters who actually vote for these politicians because of the manifestos, because of the promises, will actually see the difference in their life with these manifestos. But on their side, they can't provide this because they don't have the good policies of these health liable for this So if you want if you want a life with good quality, with better likelihood of success, please vote for the government side. Thank you.
Wonderful speech from the government whip. Speaker spoke for 4 minutes 15 seconds. Now I'd like to call upon the opposition whip here.
Okay, thank you so much for previous speakers for their speech. And I would first like to rebut government's point that they have said that there are proven arguments and they have better proven arguments and a better analysis. However, we think that you have failed to prove to us because when did we even talk about the weather? And you guys mentioned so much about trust and benefits, but our third sub can completely rebut that by holding the politicians accountable for by using such extreme measures, they will eventually set low bars for their manifestos and avoid facing legal liability. Is lower bars and expectations truly beneficial to the citizens in the first place? Lower quality manifesto is better. How are you guys supporting lower quality manifesto when you advocate for citizens' welfare? You think you can achieve better quality of life when the quality of manifesto is low? A sign of successful society is when men plant seeds of trees whose shade they will never sit in. By side government wanting to have fast changes, they are sacrificing the future progress for their country, with politicians only making manifesto that can be achieved in one term. Stop making assumptions that unable to fulfill manifestos mean that the politicians have bad intentions. If what we truly care about is the citizens' welfare, we cannot punish those who uphold good intention in the first place when it is completely unreasonable to do so since they are affected by external factors, as my first speaker has mentioned. You guys also demanded us to prove our point on this external factors point, right? So for example, for a country like Singapore, we are completely vulnerable to the rest of the world. We are interconnected and all our resources are imported from other countries. Are you telling me that for example, US cuts their resources, that US stop giving their resources to us, we will not be heavily impacted? And the thing is, the entirety of government's argument revolve around politicians being willing to shoot for the moon, which goes entirely against human nature of taking the path of this resistance. Inside government's world, we take away their mention, but forsake societal progress. In our world, we have hungry politicians that shoot for the moon and try their best to enact revolutionary change in a country. In conclusion, government is making the assumption that if a politician is unable to fulfill their manifesto, they have bad intention and they are lying to the whole nation. However, we think that there's external factors which is completely unreasonable to hold them liable for what they have done. Moreover, we think that government has failed to rebut our point, our third sub, which is that by holding politicians legally liable, it incentivizes them to set low bars for the manifestos. Government, previous speaker has mentioned that even though lower quality manifesto is good, no, this is something like they support low quality manifesto. However, we think that is absolutely not what we are trying to advocate for, because what we mutually care about is the citizens' welfare, and we don't think that having a low quality manifesto is able to achieve that in the first place. Thank you.
A wonderful speech from the opposition whip. So all the judges, please move to an empty room. I think room 10 would be empty right now, but before that, congratulations to all the teams. Okay, even if you win or not, you made it to the finals. So congratulations on that. So okay, just good luck, and I think y'all can move to the main lobby, or y'all can just talk with one another, interact, become friends. So all the judges, please move to breakout room 10. Thank you so much.